Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down skill expansion and why your current reinvestment strategy is actually a high-interest debt on your freedom.
Yeah, and to really get this, I want you to picture this scenario for a second. You're working, 80 hours a week. Your top line revenue is up 30% this year.
Right, which sounds amazing on paper.
Exactly. You just signed a lease on a bigger office, you hired 5 new people, and, well, everyone on LinkedIn thinks you're just absolutely crushing it.
Oh, totally. You've got the title, the team, that whole aesthetic of success.
Right, but behind closed doors, it's a different story. If you had to stop working tomorrow, say a health crisis hit, or you just completely burned out, you'd probably be flat broke in 3 months.
Yeah, and that is just the harsh reality for an alarming number of the people we advise here at 365 Freedom.
It really is.
Yeah.
So today we're talking about why scaling your business might actually be making you poorer and, how to fix it before the machine you built ends up just consuming you entirely.
Right, because as internal partners, we review the financial architecture of countless entrepreneurs, and we see so many brilliant founders make this exact same miscalculation over and over.
Yeah, it's so common. You build a company, it generates real revenue, and it is just so easy to fall into the trap of confusing that top-line revenue with true financial sovereignty.
Exactly. You look at the gross numbers and you think, I made it. But what you've really built is just a high-paying job that you can never, ever quit.
A very stressful job, yeah.
So the ultimate goal of our session today is to expose that fatal flaw. We are mapping out the exact transition you need to make from active income to asset income.
And we're going to lean heavily into a concept we call skill expansion, right?
Yes, absolutely. In our operational vocabulary, skill expansion is simply the mastery of skills required to produce more value in fewer hours.
Which is a critical concept.
Yeah.
And it's one that most founders completely ignore because they're too busy substituting sheer hours for actual leverage.
Right, just grinding it out.
Yeah, just throwing time at the problem. But before we can reconstruct a viable, permanent wealth strategy for your business, we really have to diagnose the existing flaw in your financial mindset.
And that diagnosis, it has to start with how you're defining wealth in the first place. Because honestly, the definition is exactly where the trap is set for you.
It really is. We have to draw a hard, undeniable line between two concepts that society constantly conflates, right? Being rich versus being wealthy.
We throw those words around like they're synonyms, but they're not.
No, the distinction isn't semantic at all. It's structural. I mean, being rich simply means you have a high income.
Right. You generate a lot of cash through intense active effort. You're the neurosurgeon billing top dollar, or maybe the agency owner pulling in a massive monthly retainer.
Yes, exactly. You have money, sure. But being wealthy means having the time, the autonomy, and, the unburdened freedom to actually enjoy that capital.
Without your constant physical or mental intervention.
Exactly. Without you having to be there. Think about the psychology of that high earner for a second. We've all seen the guy making $500,000 a year, right?
Oh, yeah. He drives the G-Wagon, lives in the gated community, wears the right watch.
Right, and society looks at him and says, wow, that guy is wealthy. But what society doesn't see is that he's sweating payroll every other Friday.
Yeah, he's answering client emails at 11:30 p.m. on a Saturday.
His stress levels are consistently redlining. Because if his phone stops ringing, his entire financial ecosystem just collapses.
Right, so he isn't wealthy. He's just a very well-compensated operator.
That's all he is. And that leads us directly into what we call lazy money.
Yes, lazy money. This is the massive diagnostic indicator we look for when we audit a founder's financial landscape. We are looking for money that isn't doing its job.
And lazy money, it exists in two very distinct, very dangerous forms. Let's break down the first one, because it's the one that most people actually think is the responsible thing to do.
Right, the conservative approach.
Yeah. The first form of lazy money is capital sitting completely stagnant in a savings account.
It feels safe, right? It feels like you're doing the prudent thing by just stockpiling cash.
But mechanically, keeping massive reserves in a standard savings account is a guaranteed loss.
A guaranteed loss because of purchasing power, right? Which is constantly under attack by inflation.
Exactly. Let's ground that in plain English for a second. Purchasing power is simply how much real-world stuff your money can buy.
So imagine you have $100 and a bag of groceries costs $10. Your purchasing power is 10 bags of groceries.
Right. Now, suppose inflation runs at, say, 5% for a few years. That same bag of groceries now costs $15.
So your $100 didn't change. It still says 100 on the bank statement, but now it only buys you 6 bags of groceries.
Your money physically degraded while you were sleeping. Inflation is literally a silent tax on your undeployed capital. It erodes the utility of your money.
So sitting in cash isn't neutral at all. It's a slow financial bleed.
Right. But, as dangerous as that is, the second form of lazy money is actually far more insidious, especially for the entrepreneurs we work with.
Yeah, the second form of lazy money is the capital that's trapped inside a business model that demands 80 hours a week from you, the owner, just to survive.
Yeah, and your money is technically, working in the business. It's buying inventory, funding payroll, maybe paying for Facebook ads.
But here's the catch. It requires an absurd biological tax from you to keep the gears turning.
The biological tax. I love that term because it's the burnout, the sleep deprivation, the strained relationships, the high blood pressure.
You are literally subsidizing the business's existence with your own life force.
You really are. And this is the psychological trap of the 80-hour week. Because you earn a high income, you convince yourself you're wealthy.
But look at the balance sheet of your actual life. Your time, bankrupt. Your stress levels, completely maxed out.
Yeah, your options if you want to take, say, a 3-month sabbatical. Non-existent. You lack real financial sovereignty.
So the first type of lazy money costs you purchasing power, and the second type costs you your physical and mental health.
Precisely.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back on this a bit, because we hear this objection from founders constantly. They say, if I stop reinvesting in my business, my competitors are going to crush me.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, isn't grinding 80 hours a week and keeping absolutely all of your capital inside the business exactly what modern hustle culture tells us is required for success?
It is what they tell you, yeah.
You read the biographies, you listen to the interviews, and the dominant narrative is always, go all in, burn the boats, reinvest every single penny back into the machine to achieve massive scale.
Right.
So I'm starving my own company of capital. Aren't I just guaranteeing that I'll lose market share? Hustle culture isn't just a buzzword. It's how people win.
Right. Well, it's how people win market share, yes. It is the accepted blueprint for building a massive, towering business. But it is a catastrophic blueprint for building personal freedom.
Catastrophic? Wow.
We have to draw a hard boundary here. There is a fundamental difference between working for money and making your money work for you until it can afford to retire you.
So you're saying hustle culture is flawed?
Hustle culture romanticizes the struggle. It tells you that, sleeping under your desk is a badge of honor, but it completely ignores the exit strategy.
It totally does.
If you keep all your capital in the business, your risk profile is just dangerously concentrated.
It's the ultimate single point of failure.
Exactly. It's a massive vulnerability because a business is an active endeavor. It requires continuous problem solving, constant market adaptation, and endless human management.
Let's look at a real-world hypothetical here to make this concrete. Let's say you run an e-commerce brand.
Yeah.
You're doing $5 million a year in revenue.
Okay.
And you're taking every dime of profit and shoving it right back into inventory and TikTok ads. You think you're building wealth.
Right. But what happens when the algorithm changes overnight and your customer acquisition cost triples?
Or what happens if your primary manufacturer overseas just goes offline?
Yeah. If your entire net worth is tied up in the operational cash flow of that single entity, you don't have wealth. You have a highly volatile liability.
Wow.
If you're grinding 80 hours a week just to maintain it, you aren't building a wealth-generating machine. You're building a machine that consumes you.
Wealth is when your money goes to work so you don't have to.
Exactly.
And that distinction perfectly tees up the micro-story we constantly refer to in our advisory sessions. It illustrates the danger of that exact hustle mindset you just broke down.
The prison cell story.
Right. To truly understand why this trap is so easy to fall into, we have to look at what is arguably the ultimate entrepreneurial mistake. The story outlines an operator who used to dump 100% of their profits back into their business under the guise of scaling.
Scaling. I mean, that is the dangerous buzzword that justifies terrible financial discipline.
It really is.
The operator in this micro story honestly believed that by taking every dollar of profit and shoving it back into marketing or hiring new staff or expanding their office footprint, they were accelerating toward freedom.
They thought, if I can just double my revenue, I'll finally be able to step back.
But the revelation they experienced, and this is something you must internalize for your own business, is that reinvesting everything didn't create freedom. It just made the prison cell bigger.
Making the prison cell bigger. That is such a devastatingly accurate assessment of what happens.
It really is.
Let's walk through the mechanics of that. You hire more people to handle the new volume, so now you have a larger payroll to worry about.
Right, more stress.
You expand your physical footprint to house the new team, so now your overhead rent is higher. You take on more demanding, high-paying clients, so your liability and your stress increase.
Yeah, you're doing significantly more volume, sure, but your margin of error gets thinner and your personal time commitment actually goes up.
Because you're managing a more complex beast?
Exactly. You're still in the cell, you
Wow.
just upgraded the square footage and added a nicer desk.
And you're trapped inside it.
Yeah.
The core truth of this entire strategy is this, and it's a paradigm shift. A business is not wealth.
Say that again because people need to hear it.
A business is not wealth. A business is merely the tool, the engine used to create wealth. The wealth itself is the destination.
Right. When you keep 100% of your profits inside the business, you're confusing the engine with the destination. You're building a bigger, hotter, vastly more complex engine, but you're never actually traveling anywhere.
Think about it like building a massive 1,000 horsepower engine, but never actually attaching it to a vehicle.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right, you spend years in the garage tuning this engine, pouring high-octane fuel into it, which, represents your marketing dollars, your reinvested capital, your sweat equity.
Yeah.
And it makes a massive amount of noise. It vibrates, burns fuel at an astonishing rate, and it looks incredibly impressive to anyone walking by the garage.
But because you never connected it to a transmission, or to a drivetrain, or to a set of tires that actually grip the road,
Yeah.
it doesn't move you an inch.
Exactly. You're just standing in the garage, deafened by the noise, covered in grease, completely exhausted from constantly maintaining it.
And that analogy perfectly encapsulates the structural reality of most founders' lives. The assets we're going to discuss: real estate, private lending, dividend funds. Those are the vehicles.
Those are the transmission and the wheels.
Exactly. If you don't extract the kinetic energy, the actual cash profit from the engine and transfer it to the vehicle, you're just burning fuel for the sake of making noise.
Keeping all your eggs in the entrepreneurship basket is a critical vulnerability. I mean, markets shift. Consumer behavior changes overnight. Regulations evolve.
Yeah, entire industries can be wiped out or fundamentally altered by a new piece of technology. Look at AI right now.
Right. And when that inevitable market shift happens, if your entire net worth and your entire cash flow are bound up inside that single engine, you have zero true security.
You are completely exposed. And this reveals the absolute delusion of being a business owner in these scenarios.
Yeah, on paper, structurally, legally, maybe your name is on the LLC. But practically, functionally, you're just a high-paid employee of your own creation.
It's the absolute worst of both worlds. You carry all the catastrophic risk of an owner, but you're burdened with the daily grinding obligations of a middle manager.
Yeah, you bear the ultimate financial liability. If the company gets sued or revenue drops, it's on you.
Yet you can't take a month off without the operation faltering. This is why the micro story is so critical. The turning point for that operator wasn't working harder or finding a new marketing hack.
It was fundamentally changing the flow of capital.
Yes. Since the business is just the engine, we have to discuss the exact calculated mechanism for building the vehicle that actually drives you toward freedom. We're talking about the physical mechanics of escape.
So if the business is just a hungry engine that will consume every single dollar we leave in it, how do we actually starve it just enough to build our wealth? What's the physical mechanism to get the money out without destroying the company?
Right. The mechanics of escape rely on one specific, non-negotiable strategic pivot. The 20% carve-out.
Okay, the 20% carve-out. Explain that.
It means carving out exactly 20% of every single check specifically for cash-flowing assets. This isn't some vague intention to, save more at the end of the year if there's anything left.
Right, hope is not a strategy.
No, it's a rigorous mathematical extraction of capital from the business environment. It's the absolute necessity of moving profit from the business bank account over to the asset column with calculated precision.
Calculated precision is the exact requirement. You can't just leave the money sitting in the main business checking account and assume you'll invest it later.
No, because there's a psychological phenomenon called Parkinson's law, which essentially dictates that work expands to fill the time allotted for it. Well, the financial corollary is that expenses will always rise to meet the income available.
Oh, absolutely. If the cash is sitting there in the account, you will find a way to spend it. You'll convince yourself that a new software subscription is a business emergency, or that sponsoring a conference is a can't-miss growth opportunity.
Yeah.
It's like a tube of toothpaste. Think about it. When you have a brand new tube, you squeeze out a massive dollop without thinking about it. You're wasteful because it feels infinite.
I love that. Yeah.
But when you're down to the very end of the tube, you're rolling it up, you're squeezing it with everything you have, and you somehow make that tiny bit last for 4 days.
That's the perfect way to look at it. The 20% carve-out acts as a permanent, systematic forcing function to keep your business operating like it's at the end of the toothpaste tube.
Exactly. The moment revenue is realized, 20% is amputated from the operating budget. It is transferred out of sight and deployed into the asset column.
Let's examine the psychological shift this forces upon you. First, it forces the business to operate leaner. It restricts the artificial oxygen of excess cash.
When you have less cash to throw at problems, you are forced to become more creative. It forces you, the operator, to actually execute on skill expansion.
Yes, let's connect that back. Skill expansion is producing more value in fewer hours. If you pull 20% of the cash out of the business, you literally have fewer resources to waste.
You can't just throw money at inefficient marketing or hire a body to cover up a broken process.
Right. You actually have to figure out how to optimize your funnel or build a better sales script or automate a workflow. The constraint creates the efficiency.
The constraint is the catalyst. I like that.
And secondly, and more importantly, the 20% carve-out guarantees that you're paying your future self first. It transitions your mindset from surviving the month to actively acquiring your permanent freedom.
Now, we need to talk about where that 20% actually goes once you carve it out. We advise diversifying your cash flow into specific proven arenas: real estate, private lending, and dividend funds.
Right. We are not talking about speculative tech stocks or volatile crypto plays or, angel investing in your buddy's app. We are talking about foundational, cash-producing mechanisms.
Let's break those down so there's no confusion for you listening. Real estate is straightforward. You buy a property, someone lives or works in it, and they pay you rent.
Simple enough.
Private lending means you act as the bank. You lend your capital to another investor, usually secured by an asset, and they pay you an agreed-upon interest rate every month.
Right.
And dividend funds. For someone who only knows how to run a service business, a dividend fund might sound like Wall Street jargon. But in plain English, it's essentially buying a tiny sliver of a basket of massively profitable established companies.
Exactly. Instead of reinvesting all their profits, these companies pay out a portion of their earnings directly to their shareholders on a regular basis. You literally get a check just for holding the asset.
And this specific action, the deployment of capital into these yield-producing assets, is what completely transforms your freedom number.
Yes, because for most entrepreneurs, the freedom number is just a hypothetical dream.
It's a massive arbitrary number written on a whiteboard.
Yeah, a vague target decades in the future that they hope to hit when they finally sell their company.
Right.
But the moment you initiate the 20% carve-out and begin purchasing cash-flowing assets, that dream ceases to be hypothetical.
It becomes a tangible, ticking clock.
The math philosophy here is profoundly empowering. Every single asset you purchase actively shaves weeks or even months off your mandatory working life.
Let's say your lifestyle costs $10,000 a month to maintain. When you take your carved-out profit and buy a piece of real estate that nets you $1,000 a month in cash flow, you have permanently eliminated 10% of your financial burden.
Wow, yeah.
You have permanently eliminated the need to generate that specific $1,000 through active labor ever again. You are literally buying back your time, increment by increment. The freedom clock is ticking down, not up.
And having carved out that 20% and having established the mechanism, we need to define exactly what you're doing with that money. You aren't just buying static objects.
Right.
You aren't just parking cash. You're buying a very specific type of utility. We define these assets as employees that never sleep and never complain.
I love that framing. Employees that never sleep. It's a phenomenal operational definition because when you allocate capital into real estate, private lending, or dividend funds, you are essentially hiring labor.
But it's non-human labor.
Right. Anyone who runs a business knows the exhausting reality of human resources. Human employees require constant management. They require motivation, HR oversight, payroll taxes, benefits.
And they're susceptible to the exact same biological tax and burnout that you are. They get sick, they have bad days, they resign, they make mistakes.
An asset employee operates on a completely different paradigm.
Completely different.
Yeah.
An asset employee works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year.
It doesn't ask for a raise.
It doesn't require a performance review. It doesn't get involved in office politics. It just sits there and executes its singular function,
Yeah.
generating yield. Think of it as the vending machine model of wealth accumulation.
The vending machine model, that's exactly it. You build or acquire the machine, the asset. You place it in a strategic location, meaning you do your due diligence and invest wisely.
Right.
And then it simply vends cash flow without your active physical labor. Your only job is to occasionally check the machine, perform basic maintenance, and collect the capital.
But to make sure those machines don't break down, we have to look at the 3 non-negotiable pillars demanded from any targeted asset. The framework lays them out clearly: stability, growth, and most importantly, cash flow.
Let's unpack those pillars. Stability ensures the asset will survive market volatility. You want something with a proven track record, not a speculative gamble. Right.
Growth ensures the underlying value appreciates to outpace the inflation we talked about earlier. You want the asset itself to become more valuable over a 10 to 20-year horizon.
But cash flow is the supreme metric. We are explicit on this point. Capital gains are nice on paper, but cash flow is what actually pays the bills while you're sitting at the beach.
But hold on, let me stop you right there. I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Happy to go for it.
I'm looking at this through the lens of a typical Silicon Valley or, aggressive entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah.
And I have to challenge this heavy prioritization of cash flow. It runs counter to a lot of the aggressive wealth-building rhetoric we hear.
I know exactly what you're going to say.
Right. Most people in the entrepreneurial space want the massive exit. They want to buy an asset, hold it, have it 10x in value, and then sell it for a gigantic payday.
The grand slam.
They're chasing the grand slam capital gain. So why is this strategy so aggressively prioritizing a slow, steady monthly cash flow over that massive life-changing payday?
Honestly, it feels too conservative.
I hear you. It feels conservative because you're used to the adrenaline of the active business. But let's look at the mechanics of relying on a massive payday.
Okay.
Capital gains, meaning that massive one-time payday when you sell a property or a business, only exist at the precise moment of a transaction.
That's true.
If you're relying on the big exit, you are kept trapped in the prison cell until the exact moment that transaction clears the bank. And here's the harsh reality. That transaction is never guaranteed.
Right. Markets crash, liquidity dries up, buyers pull out at the 11th hour due to shifting interest rates.
Exactly. If you're banking solely on capital gains, you remain completely 100% dependent on your active income right up until the day of the sale.
And if you hit a rough patch and need cash to survive, you're forced to fire sale the asset at a massive discount.
You lose your leverage entirely. Cash flow, however, is the ultimate insurance policy. It provides immediate, verifiable financial sovereignty. It pays your mortgage, your groceries, your travel today without requiring you to liquidate the underlying asset.
It's the old fable, right? You never have to kill the goose to get the golden eggs.
Precisely. You retain the asset, you benefit from its long-term growth and stability, but you consume the cash flow.
Let's say you own a commercial property. It might appreciate by $500,000 over 10 years, which is great. But the $10,000 a month it pays you in rent, that's what actually changes your daily life.
Yes, a diversified portfolio of these cash-producing, never-sleeping asset employees physically constructs a defensive moat around your lifestyle.
A defensive moat, let's visualize that for a second. You've got your castle, which is your personal lifestyle and your family's security. Outside the moat is your active business, the 1,000-horsepower engine.
Right.
If your primary business takes a massive hit, if a major client leaves, if a new competitor slashes prices, or if a global event shuts down your industry entirely, the moat protects your castle.
It does. The assets continue to vend cash, completely insulated from the operational friction and chaos of your active business.
You don't lose your house just because your business had a bad quarter.
And that level of protection completely changes how you operate the business itself. But we'll get to that in a moment, because all of these tirelessly working, cash-flowing assets culminate in one permanent, overriding objective.
The freedom number.
Right. Every strategy we are discussing, from the 20% carve-out to the vending machine model, is engineered to cross the finish line of your freedom number. But based on everything we've mapped out today, We have to completely redefine what the freedom number actually is.
We really do, because the traditional view of a freedom number is deeply flawed. When you ask most founders what their number is, they give you a massive lump sum.
$10 million usually.
Yeah, exactly. They think, I just have $10 million sitting in a bank account. I'm free. I can retire. But under the 365 freedom framework, that's entirely incorrect.
Completely wrong. Your freedom number isn't a lump sum of stagnant capital slowly losing purchasing power to inflation. It is a specific, permanent cash flow target.
It's the exact monthly yield required to sustain your desired lifestyle indefinitely without ever touching the principal.
Which requires a monumental mindset shift. You have to stop thinking like a spender and start thinking like an owner.
Let's contrast the two because that's huge. A spender looks at money as a tool to acquire depreciating liabilities. They get a big distribution from the business and they buy a depreciating car, a luxury watch, or expensive temporary experiences.
They trade their active labor for things that immediately lose value. An owner, however, looks at money as ammunition to acquire cash-flowing territory.
Buying territory, that's a powerful way to frame it.
Right. Every time you carve out that 20%, every time a share of a dividend fund is purchased or a piece of commercial property is closed on, you aren't just making an investment.
You are literally buying a localized piece of your future freedom. You are buying a plot of land in the country of your own sovereignty.
You're purchasing sovereignty inch by inch.
Oh.
Let's detail the concept of financial sovereignty because it is the exact mathematical moment your entire life trajectory changes.
It's not a feeling. It's a calculated metric.
Exactly. It is achieved at the precise millisecond when your passive asset income surpasses your total lifestyle expenses.
So let's say your lifestyle requires $12,000 a month. The exact second your dividend funds, your private lending notes, and your real estate properties generate $12,001 a month, you are sovereign.
And at that exact moment, active income, the money you generate from your 80-hour-a-week business engine, becomes entirely optional.
Optional? Think about the psychological weight that removes from your shoulders. It's impossible to overstate.
It's life-changing. You no longer have to tolerate difficult, abusive clients just to make payroll.
You no longer have to panic over a bad quarter or an algorithm change. You go to work not because your survival depends on it, but because you choose to, because you actually want to play the game of business.
The desperation is gone. And this approach is what makes wealth permanent. You aren't wealthy because of what you earn. You are wealthy because of what you keep. And how systematically that keep is engineered to grow and vend cash.
It is the transition from living a high-wire act with no safety net where one slip means disaster to residing in a fortress built on solid bedrock.
You are systematically converting your temporary, high-energy active income into permanent, low-energy asset income.
Which brings us to a final, unresolving paradox that you really need to sit with and process after this session ends. It's the ultimate irony of entrepreneurship.
Let's hear it.
To truly protect the business you bled to build, to make it resilient and objective, you must urgently build your wealth completely outside of it.
That is so true. The moment your personal financial survival no longer depends on your company's next invoice, your decision-making completely changes.
You stop operating out of fear and scarcity, and you start operating out of leverage and clarity.
You become a vastly more dangerous, highly effective entrepreneur precisely because you no longer need the business to survive.
If you're ready to put your money to work and build your fortress, visit 365freedom.line. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.